Hello and welcome. My name is Sara Zia Ebrahimi, and I'm the program director here at the Leeway Foundation. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, I'm going to talk about who the Leeway Foundation is, what makes us different from other foundations, and how to apply for our Art and Change grant and submit a strong application. If you have any questions today while I'm talking, there's two different ways that you can submit them. One is that you can email us at info@leeway.org. That's info@leeway, leeway.org. Or you can post a question on Twitter using the hashtag AskLeeway. So that's hashtag AskLeeway. While I'm talking today, if you're tuned in on our website at leeway.org/info, below this video stream, you'll see a Twitter feed. In that feed, we'll be posting links to different documents as I mention them. And even if you're not on Twitter, you're able to see that feed and click through to those documents. I want to start by talking a little bit about who Leeway is. Leeway is a regional foundation that funds women and trans artists that are using their art as a tool for social change. We fund in 5 counties around Philadelphia, so that's Bucks, Camden, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and of course Philadelphia County. We use the term trans in a very general, loose sense, but as an umbrella term that generally, even though it addresses a variety of different identities, includes people whose gender identity may not match the one assigned to them at birth. If you want to learn more about Leeway's commitment to trans inclusion as a feminist organization, you can read on our website. There are a number of different things that makes Leeway different than other foundations. One is that we actively seek to support women and trans artists whose art has either been silenced or ignored or marginalized, both because of who they are and the kind of work that they're creating. We also support people who may have never identified as an artist before, who don't have the kind of formal training or accolades that we might typically think of when we think of the word artist. We support people who are working in a discipline for the first time. So we welcome experimentation, innovation, risk-taking, and self-education. So you don't have to be an expert in the art form that you are practicing. What we're really focused on is people who are committed to community and have the passion and community engagement with their audiences. We also support people that are working in non-traditional artistic mediums. So that's different practices that maybe aren't traditionally recognized in art circles, for example, DJing or aromatherapy. We've supported a wide variety of artistic practices, which you can read more about in the grantees section on our website and look at the amazing grantees that we funded over the last several years. Another thing that makes us different is that our grants are not decided by the staff. So staff have no input in the grant decision-making process, but they're decided by a panel of artists and cultural workers who work together in a collective decision-making process to make the decisions. Those panelists come from a variety of artistic backgrounds, different ages, and they are each representing different parts of the Philadelphia and greater region community and bring that knowledge and experience with them in the decision-making process. We also offer applications and accept applications in both English and Spanish. For people for whom Spanish is a first language, even if you're highly fluent in English, sometimes expressing yourself in your language of origin can be easier. And so we welcome that opportunity for folks. For those of you that are just tuning in, I want to remind you that there are a couple different ways that you can ask questions during this process, and I will get to your questions later in the session. You can email us at info@leeway.org, that's info@leeway.org, or you can post a question on Twitter using the hashtag Ask Leeway. So there are two different grant opportunities that Leeway currently provides. One is the Transformation Award, which is an unrestricted award of $15,000. And when we say unrestricted, we really mean unrestricted. It's meant to support you in whatever you need as an artist to help you progress. So that can, for some people, it might look like paying off your student loans. For others, it might be investing in a studio space. Whatever it is that you need that's going to help you move forward. So this grant is not project specific. Instead, it is looking at the body of your work over time. So one of the requirements for the Transformation Award is that you have to have been practicing in your art practice for at least 5 years. And the other requirement is that you have to have been living in the Philadelphia area for at least 2 years. That grant deadline is only once a year on May 15th. And since that deadline has already passed for 2016, I'm not going to focus on it as much today, but you can look at the application on our website. It may change slightly for next year, but to give you a sense of what you need to prepare if you're interested in applying for it in 2017. The other grant opportunity is called the Art and Change Grant. This is a project-based grant of $2,500, and it is meant to support projects that are somehow engaging an audience or community in some sort of social change intent. The deadline for this is twice a year, in March and in August. So that's on March 1st and August 1st. So the next deadline is coming up soon. I encourage you to download the application if you haven't already and take a look at it, as I'm going to be going through it shortly and providing some tips on how to submit a strong application. But first I want to talk a bit about what we mean when we say social change at Leeway. When generally speaking, we understand art that is engaged in social change as art with a vision. And that can take a variety of different forms. So that might take the form of somehow through your art practice raising consciousness on a particular issue. It can be altering how we think about ourselves, about each other, about our cultural beliefs or the world at large. It can be a way of creating a vision of what a more just world might look like in the future. It can be working directly with a community organization that is working on a specific campaign in supplementing a cultural strategy to help them win that campaign. It can be a way of questioning mainstream values or beliefs. It can be reclaiming a traditional practice and somehow preserving it as an act of resistance or as an act of community building. It can also just be some sort of form of challenging the various oppressive structures that exist, from racism to sexism, homophobia, ableism, and all the various other challenges and oppressions and structures that we face. All of those examples are in the application guidelines, and they're also available on our website. But if you're thinking about a project for the Art and Change Grant, one of the first steps is to think about which one of those categories you think your work is engaging in. Again, a reminder for those of you that might be tuning in just now that if you have any questions, I am going to be answering questions later in the session, and you can submit them by emailing info@leeway.org. Again, that's info@leeway.org, or by posting them on Twitter using the hashtag AskLeeway. Also, while I'm talking, if you're tuned in on the website, below this video stream, you'll see a Twitter feed where there are links posted to some of the documents that I've been mentioning. Now I'm going to talk about the Art and Change application and give some tips on how to submit a strong proposal. So if you have the application available in front of you, I'm going to be pointing out particular pages in it and explaining some of the questions there. So if you have the document, the first few pages are the guidelines, which go into more detail of some of the general information that I've been sharing the last few minutes. You can use that for reference to reread and also to share with others. But I'm going to start by going to page 3 of the application, which looks like this. At the top, it has the words project description. And there are a few things here that I would like to point out. The first is that you'll see that there's a field for the requested amount. This grant is for up to $2,500. So I encourage you to request the full amount unless there's some reason that you don't need that much for your project. The second part is your change partner's name, and we'll talk about that in a moment, about what that means. Then you'll see that there's a project start date and the project end date. Now these dates are really up to you depending on the scope of the project. The one thing I will say is that for these grants, we say that it's at least 8 to 10 weeks before you hear from us. So if you're applying for the August 1st deadline, you probably don't want your project to start any earlier than October, unless you're able to somehow do the project, even if you don't get the grant funding from Leeway. But please make sure that your project is not relying on Leeway funding at an earlier time, because you won't be notified before 8 to 10 weeks. For the end date, that's really up to you based on the scope of the project. The one thing that we asked is if you were awarded a grant, that 60 days after that end date that you submit a report to let us know what happened, what changes there were, what you learned in the process. And we use that to just get a sense of how people are growing and evolving and enacting their art for social change practice. Next, you'll see this area where there's the artistic disciplines. You'll see that there are options to pick a primary and a secondary artistic discipline. You have to pick at least one. The secondary is meant for people who feel like they really are doing a project that doesn't fit into one category. The categories that we have are crafts and textiles, folk arts, literary arts, media arts, music, performance, visual arts, and multidisciplinary. Now, for many of us as artists, our work is crossing the boundaries of several of these different art forms, and it's hard to pick just one. So please know that this is not meant to be the full representation of your work, but really just a way to say, what is the primary medium that you are working in? So if you are doing a writing workshop that then is later going to be transformed into song, you would still pick literary arts as your primary, but maybe music as your secondary discipline. We encourage you, there is a category that says multidisciplinary, but I encourage you not to choose that unless your work truly is working across a number of disciplines at once. And the reason for that is because it doesn't give the panel a sense of what the real heart of the work is and what the main form that you're working in is. In this next section, it's called the social change intent, or the vision of your work. And you'll see again, this is another place where we're asking you to pick a category. This category again is not meant to be a full representation of your work, because for many of us, the social justice issues that we're working on through our art practices overlap and are intertwined in a variety of different ways. And we have what's very intersectional analysis, meaning that for some of us, feminism might not be any different than racial justice. We see them as the same thing. We're asking you to pick at least one, but no more than 3 of these categories. So the categories are cultural preservation, disability justice, displacement, migration, and immigration, economic justice, ending war, militarization, criminalization, and mass incarceration, environmental justice, feminism, indigenous sovereignty and rights, LGBTQI social movements, and transgender justice, or gender self-determination, or racial justice. Now, if you have more questions about what each of these mean, you can contact the Leeway staff at the office to discuss this more. There's also more information on our website. But we're asking you to pick which one speaks to you as the social change intent of the work that you are creating. Whichever one you pick, when you answer the questions in the main part of your application, you want to make sure that each one of your answers is pointing back to that social change intent. So if you pick environmental justice, the panel wants to be able to see in the answers that you were connecting all the work you're doing directly back to environmental justice. In this part, you'll see it's just a short description of your project. Here's where you're going to give a brief summary of the overview. You might think about this of the who, what, when, and where. I'm going to do this number of workshops or this number of performances in this location with these folks in this community, hoping for this output. This is also to give a little sense of who you are. I'm an artist that works in this medium, but here you just want a very top level summary, so don't try to put too much complicated information there. Think about this as being maybe the first place that the panel might look for a general sense of what your project is about. Again, as I'm going through and you have questions about parts of this application, I will answer them later in the session, but you can email them at info@leeway.org, or you can also post them on Twitter. So the next page in the application is the experiences page. And you'll see that there's an option for you to share 10 different experiences that have made you into the artist that you are today. Now, this is not meant to be a formal CV or resume. So we're not necessarily just looking for a list of your performances or places that you've exhibited or awards that you've won. Those things are important and we absolutely honor those, but we're looking at this space as a place to get a sense of you as an artist, what's made you into the person you are, both politically and artistically. So you'll see in the list that we're looking for personal, political, professional, or social change-based experiences. So if you do list something that's like, I performed at this poetry slam in this city with these folks, that's great, but give us one more sentence about why that was important to you. Was it the first time you performed in front of a public audience? Was it the first time that you shared the stage with a group of other women that were working on similar issues as you? What was it about that moment that was important to you as an experience that shaped you into the artist that you are? It also can be something very personal, right? So if I can give examples of different applications I've seen, someone whose work is looking at mental health and the way people are mistreated in mental health institutions could list the first time that they were hospitalized and the way that they were mistreated, right? That's a very personal experience. Some people might list the first time they realized injustice in the world when they were a child. If you were doing a project about the absence of fathers in communities, you might list the first time that you encountered your father and had to face a difficult family dynamic. It can be anything in your personal life that seeds the ideas for your current project or for past projects. One last example I'll give is someone who was working with food and farming or nutrition through an art form and listed the seizure of her family's farm by the government as a child as a formative experience. But imagine that the panel doesn't know who you are at all. And this is the place where you really get to communicate to them what you're about. And not just as a formal list of achievements, but really at the core of what makes you you. In this bottom section, you have the chance to expand on one of these 10 experiences in more detail. There's no right or wrong answer. People often ask me, like, well, which one, what's the best kind of experience to highlight there? That's really up to you about what you would like to take more of an opportunity to share with the panel about yourself and about your experiences. What's most important to you? What's been really formative? What's something that you would like to be able to say more about? Okay. On the next page, I'm now on page 5 of the application. This is where the questions about the application, the questions in the application start. There are 6 questions. If you upload this, we accept applications both hard copy or online. If you upload this online, you do not have to rewrite the questions. And so in other words, if you're answering question 1, you can just write 1 and then start typing out your answer. But you do need, there's information here about the restrictions on the size. You do need to keep it to those 2 pages, and you do need to stay within the font. So no smaller than 11-point font. For those of you that feel challenged to summarize what you want to say in less words, I encourage you to write it out first and then try to delete out or reduce and condense some of your writing so it can fit within those guidelines. Do not, though, try to squeeze it with a 10.5 font to get more in there or expand your margins, because you want to make the process of reading this application easy for the panel and not make them have to struggle with really small type. The other thing when you're approaching writing this main part of the application is that if writing is not your strength, or even if it is, a lot of us have a hard time writing about our own art practice and what it is that we do. One thing that you could do is have a friend or someone you work with interview you and ask you the questions and record what you're saying. You can use a smartphone, a cell phone, or some sort of audio recorder, and just have them talk to you. Don't think about the application, just talk from your heart. And for most of us, there will be really great gems that come out of that process that you can then transcribe and write down and use in your application. So if the thought of a blank page and trying to address these questions shuts you down creatively, that might be another approach to how to do this application. So the first question that you see here says, summarize your Art for Social Change project. This is, exactly as it says, meant to be an overall summary of what the project is that you're doing. So what is the project that you're proposing? Who do you think is going to be part of it? Again, you're going to have areas later we can talk more about the audience, but we just want a general overview in this question of what the project is that you're proposing. Question number 2 asks why is this project important to you? And this is where you are going to talk about your personal connection to whatever the issue is that you're working on. So if you are working with survivors of domestic violence, doing a writing workshop, this might be a place where you talk about family members, your own personal experiences, some reason why this is an audience or community that you want to work with. If your project is addressing gentrification in your neighborhood, and you are questioning your role in that process, if you're someone in that demographic, you might write there about how you've been grappling with those issues and how you find affordable housing without displacing communities that have been there for a long time. You might write about that here. If you're someone that, for your whole life has felt marginalized, that you weren't represented in the media, and now you want to create videos that you feel do provide that reflection for you, talk about what that meant to grow up without a reflection of yourself in the media and why you want to create these images. For number 3, this is a 2-part question, so parts A and B. Part A says, as part of this process, you were asked to identify the social change intent of your project. And now this, again, is pointing back to that list of issues that we talked about a few minutes ago that you had to pick from. Explain how your project engages with and expresses your social change vision and the intent you identified. So this is where, for example, if you pick racial justice, that you need to connect for the panel how this project fits into a larger racial justice movement or analysis. So what I mean by that is, as a filmmaker, which I am, when I applied for the Leeway grant before I was on staff here, I wrote about how I make films that feature women of color in the main roles as well as on the cast and crew, and that even though I wasn't single-handedly going to change the media landscape with my work that I was creating, that I at least was joining in a sort of larger movement towards that's calling for more diversity in our media, as well as for those of us that were acting and being a crew in the project, all improving our technical skills and ability. So, so how is the work that you're doing a piece in a larger puzzle that connects to that social change intent that you identified? And this is also captured in part B, which is describe the goals intended for the impact of your project. So as much as we would like for our individual projects to make fundamental changes in the world, we know that in general social change work takes time, and particularly when we're working in the cultural realm. So we're really just looking at how is your work a piece in that larger movement, right? If you're someone that's working in speculative fiction or sci-fi, what does it mean to provide a vision of how the world might look different in the future? Whether that's a utopian or dystopian vision of warning us about trends that might go wrong that we need to fix now, or envisioning how things could go better. So don't assume that the panel understands how your work connects to environmental justice or how your work connects to feminism. This is this place in number 3 where you're really going to spell that out. Question number 4 says, define your community or audience. What is your relationship to the audiences or communities you work with, and how does your identity play a role in this? So this is really for a lot of us, this may be a place where many different intersections of our identities come together. But this is where you're going to talk about who you are and who you're working with, right? For some of us, that might be very clear. If you are saying, I am a Black woman making this work for other Black women who live in Germantown, neighborhood of Philadelphia, right? You have a very specific audience of who you are making this work for and how that relates to who you are. For others, we might be making work that we want to address a variety of different audiences. And that's okay. We might, but the thing is that you need to spell out who all those different audiences are. What we don't want here is just a general answer of everyone in Philadelphia who cares about immigration. Right? That's too broad. So give us more of a sense of who are the audiences that you're trying to reach with your project. And also, what is your role in relationship to them? And this is particularly important if you are someone who is going to be working in the role of a bridge builder or somehow working in a community that you're not necessarily from or a part of. But you need to show the panel here that you have an understanding about what your relationship is as someone who maybe isn't from the neighborhood originally, but is going to be working with long-term residents there. If you're someone who's younger and you're going to be working with seniors, what is your relationship there? So you're talking about yourself in relationship to the communities that you're working with as well. For number 5, we talk about where the question is, how does the project engage the audience or communities you're working with? If your project takes place outside of the Delaware Valley region, explain how you will make a connection to the region and what impact to expect. So the first part of this question, another way to think about this might be, what is your marketing and outreach plan? Or how are you going to connect with audiences? How are they going to find out about your project? How are they going to participate in your project? So if you are someone that is already very much connected in the community that you imagine sharing your project with, don't assume that the panel knows that. Let them know how you're going to let people in the community know. So even if it's, I have 2,000 followers on Facebook and I'm just going to announce this on my Facebook page, that is fine, but make sure you explain who that is and who are those people in that community. Are they other people that are similarly interested in those issues? Are they other artists that are doing the same practice? If you are working with young people, how are you going to work with those young people and engage with them? How are they going to have agency in the project, right? We always want to make sure that if you're working with another constituent group that is not a group that you are from or of, that how do you know that this project is something that community wants or needs, and how are you engaging in that dialogue with them to find that out? If you were doing a project that involves traveling somewhere else, let's say overseas or to another part of the country where maybe you're going to do some photographs or document people nationally, how are you going to bring that back to the Delaware Valley region? So is there going to be some screening here where you would show your film? Are you going to have an exhibit of the photography? Whatever the project is in the art form, if it is something that involves research or some sort of aspect that happens outside the region, you have to be able to show how it's going to connect back locally. And then the last question that we have here is, why did you choose your change partner? And we haven't talked about the change partner yet, but I'm going to use this opportunity to actually jump forward in the application to page number. So actually, it's after the application. It's the last part. And this may be a separate form if you're downloading it from the website, which is the change partner form. Now, the change partner is meant to be someone that is going to help support you in getting your project done. So it can be an individual or an organization, and they don't have to be in Philadelphia, but they do need to be someone that somehow demonstrates to the panel that you have a connection to the communities that you are claiming you do, or you have access to the resources that you're saying you're going to have for this project. So what I mean by that is if you submit an application saying that you were going to do workshops or make a poster, let's say, that's going to be distributed in public schools in Philadelphia, if in your experiences page you don't have any experience going into Philadelphia public schools, the panel might ask, well, is this person really going to have access? Are they going to be able to do this? The change partner is a place where you can affirm that by maybe having a principal or a teacher from the school that you're going to work with, and they will submit a letter saying, yes, I'm working with this person, and I'm looking forward to bringing their artwork into my classroom or their workshop or whatever the project is. And that indicates, like, okay, this person does have access to these schools, and this is a project that can actually be pulled off. If you're doing something in a neighborhood, if it's an organization that's very much rooted in that community or neighborhood, if they're acting as your change partner, that will help reinforce that you really are doing something that's based in that neighborhood and community. In some cases, there's one example, if you're doing let's say an artistic practice, a craft, like a particular kind of textile handiwork that only your auntie in Puerto Rico is the only person that knows how to do it that you know of in your life, that person might be your change partner because they are going to help you learn the process and help you get it done. So again, it can be an individual or an organization. They don't have to be in the Philadelphia area, and they don't have to identify as a woman or trans in this case. The thing that is key, though, about this change partner form is that your application will not be considered complete without it. So it is always a heartbreaking experience to have to tell people that their application will not go through because their change partner didn't submit their change partner form. So one of the first steps as you're conceptualizing your project and preparing for the August 1st deadline is identifying who your change partner is going to be and going to them and making sure that they can get this in time. Similar to the main application, they can submit it online or submit a hard copy. And if you want to be sure that they've gotten it in time, you can always call the office and confirm that we've received it. So to go back to the actual application, question number 6 asks, why did you choose your change partner, and what kind of expertise will they provide, and what is their connection to the community that you're working with? So this is your chance to be able to share what it is, why it is that you picked that change partner, and what you're hoping to get from that. Some people get confused between what a change partner is and what a collaborator is. If you go back to question number 1, you'll notice that it does say, if this is a collaboration, describe the role of each collaborator. If you are applying with a collaborator, that means that you both identify as a woman or trans, and that you work together on a project, and that you are submitting this application together. In that case, if you're applying with a collaborator, you will each need to submit your own experiences page. So you'll have 2 experiences page, but then you'll submit one of the actual body of the application questions together. You don't have to have a collaborator, and even if you're working with other people as part of your project, if they're not the official main collaborator on your project, you don't have to. Obviously when we're working in community, we end up working with a lot of different folks. But this is intended to be if there's someone that you, for example, if you are a musical duo and you always do everything together, or you're, a filmmaking team that has produced several pieces of work together, that you might apply together because your collaboration has been really key to creating this work together. The change partner is someone that you'll be working with that's going to be supporting the project, but they are not filling out that application. They're just filling out the change partner form. So, and I'm seeing that there is a question that just came through actually from online asking about the change partner. So I'm hoping that that answers that person's questions, but if not, please feel free to email in again at info@leeway.org, or post your questions on Twitter at using the hashtag AskLeeway. The last page of the application is your budget. This is a place for you to show that you have a sense of what it takes to pull off this project, right? So if you said that you're gonna work on a video project with a group of youth, but then you're only budgeting $100 for video cameras, that might raise a flag for the panel of saying, well, does this person really understand how much it costs to have video cameras? So you do want to do a little bit of research to make sure that you have a sense of how much these things cost. One important thing is that your change partner cannot be financially benefiting from this project. So you cannot have a line item in your budget that is paying your change partner. It is okay to pay yourself a partial artist stipend as part of it. It's okay to pay other people for their services as part of this. You know, we do believe in artists getting paid, but we want to see this spelled out of like, what are the different things that it takes to produce this project. There's also a question here that says if your project, you know, is actually a lot more expensive than this $2,500 and you're just asking Leeway to fund a piece, to let us know what other kind of funding sources you are applying for or have gotten for this project. That also raises another issue that I wanted to share, which is that if you have a project that has several different distinct phases, you might think about only applying for one phase of that project. So for example, if you were working on a screenplay or a book where you needed to interview several people and do research, you might just apply for that first phase of research as one Art and Change grant, and then you can come back in another year because you can apply and receive the grant. Not in the same year, but you can come back a year later and apply for the next phase of that project. Another example might be if you're working on a film, maybe you'll apply for funding for the production of the film and then you can come back and apply for the post-production or the distribution aspect of doing a screening and some sort of community engagement in the Philadelphia area. So think about when you're thinking the budget is, if it seems like a very large budget and you don't have any other sources that you're gonna go to for money, how can you maybe break down the project into just a segment and just apply for that piece of it so that that $2,500 seems like a realistic amount to cover your project. And that is the application. Again, these are available online. You can submit a hard copy or submit them online. We do also offer support where we can give feedback to you on your applications. Next week on the 14th, we will be at the Institute for Community Justice in Center City, Philadelphia, doing in the first half another info session like this where we'll be sharing information, but in the second half we'll actually be taking time to sit down with folks to give feedback on their applications. That information is available on our website if you'd like to RSVP and take that opportunity to come get feedback from Leeway staff on your applications. If you're not able to make it then for some reason, you can also give us a call at that office, and if we have time and are available, we can schedule to give you some feedback. But I also encourage you to think of other people in your life who might be able to give your application a read and give you some sort of feedback on the application. I'm going to take a moment to see if there's any other questions that came in. It seems like it looks like there's another question that came in that says, does your change partner have to submit to Leeway directly? Or is it okay to have them send it to me and allow me to submit them both together? You can drop off a hard copy of their change form if you would like, but they also can just submit it directly online. So you can have them do it that way. And really theirs is a very short form. It's really, shouldn't take them too long to do. So you should ask them in advance though, because people do get busy and don't follow through at times. And not because they don't want to support your project, but just because some change partners don't realize the importance of their letter to your application moving forward. I'm going to take a moment and see if there are any other questions that have come through. Again, if you would like to submit a question, you can email us at info@leeway.org. That's info@leeway.org. Or submit your question on Twitter using the hashtag AskLeeway. A few final tips, and then we'll wrap up for today. One is, don't assume that the panelists who are reading this are in your artistic discipline. So if you are a dancer and you're using particular lingo or talking about a dance practice that folks in the dance world might really know about, make sure you spell that out. Imagine that you were talking about your art form to someone else who doesn't know anything about it. Don't make any assumptions about how they understand your art form, and also don't assume that they understand how your work connects to the social change intent. So it may seem very obvious to you, well, of course I'm working with survivors of domestic abuse on writing because writing is a form of healing, but we need you to say more. Like, why do you think it is a form of healing? And what is it about the particular art form that you are engaging in that allows that healing to happen, for example? Right. So in the case of writing, I might give the example that doing stream of consciousness writing unearths particular things from our brains that maybe don't come out in other ways. If you're doing dance, there's things that we store in our body that come out and release through movement that we're able to heal. If you're a DJ, there's people that come to dance parties that you might not be able to engage with in other spaces. So what is it about the form that you are engaging in that helps you connect with the people you want to connect with? Spell that out for us. Don't imagine that we know that. Also, my second tip that I want to close with is that less is more. We all, especially if we're really passionate about our project, have a tendency to want to pack a lot of information in. We're really prioritizing clarity over the use of, fancy big words or something like that. And what I mean by that is, can someone who doesn't know you and doesn't know anything about the project read the application and get a clear sense of what your project looks like? If you're writing poetry, don't just say writing poetry, but what kind of style? What does it sound like? What kind of style is it like? If you're making a film, what a documentary means very different things to different people and what it looks like. So is it experimental? Is it talking heads of people that you're interviewing? If you're doing dance, is it something that happens just on a stage, or is it interactive with the audience? Give us more of a sense of what your art form actually looks like, sounds like, what does the experience, because with this application, you're not submitting work samples. And so it's really through your writing that you're gonna let the panel know what it is that you're trying to do. And my last tip, and then I'll check real quick to make sure we don't have any other questions coming through. It looks like we don't. My last tip that I will share is just be true to yourself. And what I mean by that is we, more than anything, are looking for people who are doing the work in their community and are passionate about the work. So as I said at the beginning of the session, it's not about your accolades of awards you've done or places that you've performed. We're really looking at how you engage with community and how your work has some sort of vision for raising consciousness, envisioning a better world, helping people question mainstream culture and beliefs. So focus on that, and you will have a very successful application. And please, by all means, ask for help from us and from other people in your life. It looks like, sorry, I just got one last question. I live in Bethlehem, PA. Can I apply? I actually don't know offhand what county Bethlehem is in. I apologize that I don't know my state geography very well. But again, the 5 counties that we fund are Bucks County, Camden, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and Philadelphia County. So anyone who lives in those counties can apply. Last chance for any questions to come in. Again, at info@leeway.org or on Twitter using the hashtag AskLeeway. I'm just being told by one of my colleagues that Bethlehem, unfortunately, is not in one of those 5 counties. So unfortunately, to that person who sent in that question, you don't apply. But again, the counties that are eligible are listed on our website. I have one more question coming in. Again, if you want to add yours, info@leeway.org or on Twitter using the hashtag AskLeeway. Waiting for this to come in. Okay, well, as I'm waiting for that question to come in, I will also say that there are a couple forms of identification that you are going to need to submit also with the application that you want to have prepared. One is a documentation of your age, and the other is documentation of your residency. So the residency documentation can just be a utility bill in your name or something that came to your house that shows that you live there. And you can even just take a photo of it on a smartphone if you want to submit that photo, but we just need to see some sort of confirmation of your address. Same with age. If your legal name on your documentation does not match the name that you use in the world individually or as an artist, that information is highly confidential. We will not share that publicly or in any of our communications if you indicate that that's the case. So on the application, you'll notice that there's a field for your legal name and then your artist name and which name you would like to be addressed by. And that's why we have that there, is to make sure that people can have the confidentiality that they need. All right, our next question that is coming in is, I'm a performance artist and a writer, but also a teacher. My project is centered around teaching children, and I'm not sure how to classify that. So my thought for that person, so if you're a performance artist and writer, also teacher, working with children, is it really depends on, I would ask the question of like, what is it that you are trying to teach them or work with them on, right? So if it is, if it's focused on understanding race and racial justice, right, you might pick that. If you're going to be learning about the environment and thinking about sustainability and how we work in the world, you might pick that. It's hard for me to say, not knowing more details about what you are working on with them, but I would think about who are those young folks that you're working with, and what is the thing that you want them to get out of it. If you look on our website, you can see some examples of other grantees that are working with youth that are focusing on particular areas. So I can think of one project where an artist was working, actually, she framed it in terms of economic justice, right, which is that she was working with youth at a community center and gave them a couple of different options of art practices, like, or a craft form that they could engage in. They picked what they wanted to do, and they made these products, and then they had a community fair where they sold those. They were actually paper mache beads that they had made, but in part of the process, they also learned about economics and alternative economies and how to keep money in the neighborhood. There's other projects, other individuals we funded who are working with young women, thinking about empowerment and speaking up and taking up space. There's ones that have focused specifically working with young women of color, looking at a racial justice lens. We have grantees in the most recent grant cycle who were two musicians that are in a duo together, who are singing songs aimed at young girls that are about science and environmentalism. So they had environmental justice and feminism focus. So it really depends on what the content is that you're focusing on in that project, but feel free to follow up with Leeway. And another question, can you apply if you were in a low residency graduate program? So you cannot apply if you are in an arts program getting an MFA. If anything that is related to an arts program, if you are enrolled, you are not able to apply for the Leeway grant. However, if you are in another field that is that happens to somewhat overlap, that is okay, but you cannot be studying a formal art practice in school and be enrolled while you're applying. Last chance for questions before we wrap up. Again, you can post them on Twitter using the hashtag AskLeeway or via text. Via email at info@leeway.org. If there are no other questions at this time, I encourage you all to follow up with us at the Leeway office. We would love to give you feedback and help you out. Excerpts from today's live stream will be posted most likely on our website, but also on our social media. So if there's parts that you found useful that you would like to share with others, that will be available. And I wish you all best of luck with your applications and look forward to seeing your inspiring projects. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.